Was it something I said?
You're gonna make me throw up, man.
I'm sorry.
Oh, dude.
And the home of the brave.
Game on!
Welcome to episode 34 of the Hit the Deck podcast, where we talk deck hockey, street hockey, ball hockey. It's hockey in sneakers. Oh, man. I always say, oh, man, like just doing that introduction is such a burden. I don't know. I don't get winded that quickly. I mean, I know I'm out of shape, but still. What I should say is I am very happy to be talking to you, and I'm very happy to be talking to you, James.
Same here, man. Very excited, and that's okay. If you were winded, I'd be worried about it, but oh, man, that's a good thing. So, yeah.
Welcome to the Hit the Deck. Oh, boy. What kind of goalie would I be if I couldn't string together a sentence?
Yeah, man. One of the reasons why Gary and I are excited is that as long as the weather holds up, please, that we're going to play on the weekend. We're going to play deck hockey, which we haven't in such a long time. So
at long last, the skies have cleared and the sun shall be shining down upon us, and we shall partake in hockey, glorious hockey once more.
Amen, brother.
Oh, boy. Okay, so that being said, I think we can jump right into our starting lineup. And for tonight's starting lineup, in goal, I am, of course, the American Rhino, number 35, Gary McComiskey, and my illustrious co-host.
On defense, number 4, I'm James Sajazi.
How are you, James?
Pretty well, my friend, and yourself?
You know, I can't complain. I really can't. Well, I could, but I won't, because honestly, I don't have anything of any substance to complain about. I got a pretty good life, all things considered. I'm glad to hear you're doing well, and if you are well enough to grace us with what is on deck for this particular podcast, I would greatly appreciate it.
This one's for you then, my friend.
Thank you.
Vote a key. Election day is upon us soon. God help us. Anyway, here's something that actually is worth voting for. You already know our jersey numbers, but Gary and I will tell you a little more about why number 35 and number 4 are our top candidates and what number should be run out of town on a rail. Keepers of the Hall. The Hockey Hall of Fame recently tweeted a picture of 9-foot-tall statues of Cyclone Taylor and Ken Dryden that greet you before entering a wing called the NHL Zone. Those statues will assure that everyone is on his best behavior when in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And it's riveting. Huge assists goes to the American Rhino on this one. The National Women's Hockey League started up their second season back on October 8th. But did Hit the Deck superfan Sue have something to do with the New York Riveters moving from Brooklyn to Newark? And that's what's on deck.
Thank you, James.
You are welcome, sir.
You know, I think I want to change what I said about feeling good. In light of the election coming up, I'm going to change my answer.
Well, at least for now, we can feel good, and then maybe next week we'll see how we're doing.
I suppose. All right. You know what? Before we jump into the Hit the Deck proper,
Sure.
I'd like to bring on a very special guest. And we have a very special guest on tonight's podcast. My daughter, Julia, is here. Julia, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
All right. Julia, I'd like to ask you a question. Can you tell everybody on the podcast, what do you think of hockey?
I think it's great because I root for my favorite team,
What team is that?
Rangers.
All right. Thanks, Julia. I love you very much. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Princess.
No, I just melted into a little puddle. I love you too, Julia. Thank you. That's so sweet.
Yeah, she is a sweetheart. She wanted to be on the podcast tonight, but I told her it was after her bedtime, so she wanted to record a special little message there.
Aw, definitely the best, one of, if not the best clip that we have on the entire podcast.
You know, I gotta give my daughter credit. I'm actually very proud of her because I was joking with her about that I would go to bed and she could do the podcast tonight, which is what kind of set us on this whole thing. And I asked her if she knew how to set everything up, you know, because I have my whole setup here in the living room that I do to record the podcast. And to her credit, she pointed out most of the stuff that I set up to put together the podcast. And she is almost always in bed by the time I set all this stuff up. So she's only seen it a couple of times.
Really, she deserves to be bragged about because she's an extraordinary young lady, and a chip off the old block too. So she's got the hockey fire in her, thanks to both her great parents, by the way, and the technical genius that is the American Rhino. So that's amazing for a 6-year-old girl to figure that. So yeah, you know, if you and she want to take over, I'm not going to get in your way. So I'd love to hear that, actually, quite frankly.
That's fine.
I think it would be a lot
You're
better.
You're going to make me blush. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. But I am happy to let Julia get her much needed rest and do the podcast with you.
And just as a character, the character that this young lady has, I mean, that's pretty incredible for a young girl to do it beforehand, to record it and willingly go to sleep and do what she's supposed to do. Just a credit to her and a credit to you and your lovely wife for being wonderful parents. So we're blushing a little bit, but the child deserves it. She is the Wayne Gretzky of children. So.
Well, thank you.
Put it in perspective. Okay?
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it was entirely voluntary on her part, but she didn't put up too much of a fight. So,
well, just on a little tangent,
she is 6, so
yeah. But just to put it in perspective a little bit, that on YouTube, Jimmy Kimmel every year has a bit where he has parents lie to their children and say that they ate their Halloween candy and then record it. Uh-huh. So from the tantrums that were shown, at least from what I saw on Facebook, I didn't see the actual episode. Maybe there were more. Even if Julia objected a little bit, she's doing what she's supposed to do. No problem. Because these kids were just like children from hell.
You know what?
I understand you don't come between a child and his candy, but still, it was really rough.
You know what? I'm going to continue to brag about my daughter just a little bit if you, the listener, will bear with me. But on the subject of Halloween candy, so Julia and her mom were out trick-or-treating, and I hadn't gotten home from work yet. So they left a bag of candy just hanging on our front door with a sign that says, "Please take one." And when we got home, we just happened to get home at the same time. The bag was gone. Someone had taken the whole bag of candy because, you know, some kids are inconsiderate. And Julia, God bless her, Julia offered up the candy that she had collected trick-or-treating to give out to the other trick-or-treaters if we were out of candy. And we weren't. We had more. So, you know, it wasn't necessary. But that's how generous my daughter is.
If that doesn't sum up what a wonderful child she is, and I know at least one fan is right on board with what we're saying, that's Sue, because she loves Julia pretty much as much as you and your wife do. Uh-huh. But, wow, she deserves a Stanley Cup. That's all I could say. So for the deck hockey world, that is the highest honor to bestow on someone so wonderful and deserving. So great job, man. You guys just did a wonderful job so far, raising a wonderful young lady.
We're trying, but a lot of credit goes to her just for, you know, for her strength of character. So we are blessed.
Amen. And deservedly so.
All right. So that being said, let's talk about some people who have maybe not as much character.
Yeah. So Gary and I try not to be political. I'm sure you get enough of that from everywhere else you turn.
It's almost over, James. I'm counting the days until Election Day. It's almost over.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's. I'll just keep my opinion to myself.
Yeah, but, probably smart.
Anyway, like we said, it's if you're watching TV, and I'm not even talking about the news, just entertainment and radio, whatever. Just people are always spewing their opinions, whether you want it or not, whether it's a fact or not. It doesn't matter. It's just whatever. So our little take is just to give you an idea of why. And I went through Hit the Decks in the past, and I thought we kind of touched on this before, but we never really explained. I mean, people know who your favorite goalie is of all time, so we figure why you're number 35, but we never really explained why we have our numbers and if it was a process of elimination or whatever the case is. So figure we'll do something that's fun to vote on, and you, the fan, you, the listener, are more than welcome to chime in on that as well.
Cool.
With your favorite numbers and why you are you chose your number that you wear.
Yeah, man.
So,
hit us up at hitthedeck@gmail.com, or tweet at us at Hit the Deck Pod. Or if you want to open a dialogue, jump on our Facebook page at Hit the Deck and let us know that way.
Absolutely. The more the merrier, and we appreciate it, and thanks for listening. So leading off, especially for goalies in general, according to my research and just being a hockey fan most of my life, it seems that goalies stick with the numbers in the 30s to be most popular because, like in soccer, way back for the first few decades of hockey, professional hockey, number 1 was designated for the starting goalie. But that being changed in around the 50s or 60s or so because the league, the NHL proper at that point, was made mandatory that you had to have a backup goalie on your roster.
Sure. So, I'm surprised it took that long, frankly.
Exactly right, especially when they weren't wearing masks, for goodness sake.
Although, I think I mentioned this once before. I have a book of facts about the Rangers, and back in... I forget if it was the 30s or 40s, but it was one of their early Stanley Cup runs. And they actually had to play one game. So back then they didn't have backup goalies. Essentially, like local goalies or goalies from local teams would just kind of sit in the stands. And if they were needed, they'd come in and play. But for this particular game, they didn't have one. Like the home team or whatever didn't ensure that there was a backup goalie somewhere in the building. So the Rangers GM at the time, general manager, had to come in and play goal for the rest of the game when the goalie got injured.
That would only be fun if that was still the case and we were at a game together. I would love to see you on the MSG ice guarding that goal for us. That'd
well, it
be
was
awesome.
like, college goalies or whatever.
Nah, whatever. But anyway, so yeah, with that, and also with the majority of those goalies being number 1, a lot of them were that good to have been retired. So as you mentioned, the Rangers, we have or the New York Rangers, I should say, pardon me for my fan showing, but number 1 is retired in the Rangers organization because of Ed Giacomin.
Sure.
And other great number 1s were Vezina himself, the man that the trophy is named after for the goalie MVP.
Who
and
you
Terry
talked
Sawchuk.
about on a recent podcast, I believe.
That's right. So that's why number 1s are out when it comes to modern day goalies. There are a few that are still around, as a matter of fact, but the majority of them, and at least from my point of view, the best recent goalies of modern day NHL, for some reason, are numbers from 30 through 39. That decade is just, they seem to, maybe that has to do with growing up and admiring the previous players before you and such.
Sure.
But so, yeah, if you wouldn't mind kicking off your love of 35 and why you chose that number, and then we'll go into a list of other famous goalies who are in your fellow decade.
Well, it's well-trod ground on this podcast, so for our longtime listeners, I won't bore you too much because you already know the answer, but in case you happen to be new, my favorite goalie of all time is the former Rangers goalie Mike Richter, who wore number 35. He carried the Rangers to a Stanley Cup in 1994. He's, some might say, something of an American hero, carrying the not the Rangers, the American team to the World Cup in '96, and he's just he's kind of a blue collar goalie who worked really hard He wasn't so much a finesse goalie as he was just somebody who worked hard to always be in position and never gave up on a play and just kind of, gutted it out and had a lot of success in the process. And I find that whether it's through coincidence or some kind of subliminal emulation, I find my style kind of meshes very well with his style. And so I decided it was a natural fit to be number 35.
And plus, it's a cool looking number too. It looks good on the back, especially for a goalie. It fills your whole back, and it's a cool looking number.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't know why, I've always been partial to numbers with 5 in them, like 15 or 55 or something like that. So to have the number 35 seems natural to me as a goalie.
I'm glad you brought that up too. Any numbers that you would refuse to wear, like we talked about in Hit the Deck number 13 about superstitions. Do you have a number that you just hate?
I have some players that I hate that have worn numbers. Like I would never wear number 2. No offense to Brian Leach. I don't know. I don't have any. I've never really thought about that. I don't have it. I don't think I have any numbers that I'm really morally opposed to.
Okay.
How about you?
Yeah, I'll get into why I went with number 4 in a little bit, but just to put a bow on, and thank you for asking.
Yeah, sure.
To put a bow on the goalies, just to back up what we were saying before, great goalies who've worn or are wearing number 30. There's a guy on the Rangers who number 30 there, and Mr.
He's
Henrik
pretty
Lundqvist.
good, I guess.
You may have heard of him, Henrik Lundqvist. For the Devils fans out there, Martin Brodeur was number 30. For Red Wings fans, Chris Osgood, and for the Sabres fans mostly, Ryan Miller, just to name a few who've worn number 30. Number 31 for the Islanders fans, Billy Smith, battling Billy Smith. Grant Fuhr, who is one of the all-time great goalies from the Oilers. Cujo, Curtis Joseph, and Carey Price, who I think right now is probably the greatest goalie in the world, especially coming off of the World Cup. And the Canadiens are currently at the recording of this podcast are unbeaten. I think in regulation they're unbeaten, but there's something. I think they have 19 points already through their first 8 games or something ridiculous. So
didn't some idiot predict that they wouldn't make the playoffs before the season?
Yes. Oh wait, was it you or me?
It was me.
If it was me, then I'm the idiot.
No,
if
it was
you,
me.
Then no. Okay, so never mind.
The season is still young.
It is. Come on now. There's a lot more hockey to be played. But anyway, case in point, I've been watching a lot of NHL Network lately, and I'm sure a lot of Hit the Deck fans would agree with watching that wonderful network a lot. But they did make the point that the Stanley Cup champions, the defending Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins, were horrible in the first half of last year. And
That's
then
true.
When their players got back and they got hot and they went all the way to win it all. So you're right. It's a long way away. So we'll see. But anyway, number 31, worn by Price and other great goalies in the past. Number 32, I did track down one, and he is another nice little bow to tie around this, Antti Ranta, who is the backup goalie for the New York Rangers. But the really cool thing about Mr. Ranta is, Gary, you're going to love his new mask.
Yeah.
So I don't want to spoil the surprise. If you can Google it or whatever search engine you could use to see it. If there is a picture of it, they did show you on MSG during, I think, one of the intermissions of tonight's game. If you can see a replay of that, but if you don't know what it is, I'll tell you later. But you're going to really love it. It's really going to come full circle with that.
So what you're saying is I'm going to be pro Ranta.
Absolutely. Exactly right. So he's a current number 32 in goal.
But I'm bummed.
There you go. Number 33, Patrick Waugh. All right.
Sorry.
Patrick Waugh, who is one of the all-time greatest goalies. Number 34, John Van Beesbrook, the Beezer, one of my all-time favorites, besides Mr. Richter, of course. We talked about number 35, the American Rhino. I didn't track down a 36, but I'm sure there is a few floating around there. But number 37 was Oli the goalie. So the man's nickname was Oli the goalie. So number 37, that kind of sums it up there. And didn't find a 38 per se, but number 39 was worn by Mr. Dominic Hasek. So
the Dominator.
Yeah, another legendary goalie. So there is the commonality between great goalies, yourself included,
Yeah.
and the numbers 30s. So pretty cool there.
I'm not taking any credit for being a great goalie. I'm just stating for the record.
You're too humble, but come out and see for yourself. In terms of deck hockey, Gary's one of the best. So we wouldn't just say that without backing it up.
Well, you might.
Okay, but who? I'm not lying, you know.
Yeah, all right. Move on.
Anyway, so from there, for most forwards and defensemen, double-digit numbers are usually the way to go, or the most popular. But legendary single-digit numbers being number 4, 7, and 9, just to name a few.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, number 4, Bobby Orr, is I'd say the most famous number 4 for
Sure.
Devils fans. Scott Stevens, I'm sure, he has a soft spot in your hearts forever. Number 7, Phil Esposito, one of the all-time best, and obviously number 9, we just lost him recently, but Mr. Hockey Gordie Howe.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go for that. Personally, for me, I like number 4, and it's I play defense, and I apologize profusely for insulting the number in that aspect and Mr. Bobby Orr. But my love of the number, it was kind of weird. In kindergarten, I just liked the number for whatever reason. It has nothing to do with my birthday or anything else. I just kind of thought it was cool that in the English language that the number 4, the amount of letters of the number equals the number itself, so F-O-U-R.
Oh, yeah. What about that?
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then I was a huge baseball fan my whole life, so growing up. And then in 1985, Lenny Dykstra came along to the New York Mets, and he was number 4, and that was it for me. That just clinched it. That was my number. So I loved it for those reasons, and kept that love always. So again, my apologies to hockey fans out there and defensemen who are deserving of the number. Sorry.
You know, speaking of Lenny Dykstra, I just thought of a comparison that you're probably not going to appreciate. So I don't know if I should even bring it up. But given that I mentioned it, and if I don't bring it up, it'll probably make for pretty boring radio. So
go for it. Off the field, he's a mess. On the field, I love the way he played. But go ahead.
Lenny's nickname was Nails. And in the mid-'90s, in the WWF, there was a wrestler with the name Nails, and his gimmick was that he was a convict. And then Lenny Dykstra, of course, got arrested for being, the mess that you just kind of alluded to. So it just strikes me as kind of an interesting similarity there.
Yeah, that's scary. Wow. Thank you for that tidbit, though.
Yeah, sure.
So number 35 and number 4, they are our votes for our favorite numbers anyway. So they are close to our hearts, and that's why we wear them.
I believe Nails the wrestler feuded with the Big Boss Man.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
His gimmick, if you're not aware, the Big Boss Man's gimmick was that he was a prison guard. So
right.
he feuded with the convict, and he was apparently the guard that had put Nails in prison. So when he got out, he was very mad at him. So, of course, they settled their differences in the wrestling ring, as you do.
See, at the time, you're probably thinking, this is just bad writing. And lo and behold, it came true. So, yeah. Wow, way to go, WWF. It was still WWF at that time, so don't yell at me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't change names to the WWE for another decade or so.
Thank you very much, sir.
You got it. I don't know if the Big Boss Man ever had any kind of interaction with Lenny Dykstra. I'm not privy to that information.
I don't know, but when Lenny was with the Phillies, he was a thorn in the Braves side, so who knows?
Although I do know that Pete Rose has fallen afoul of some WWE superstars in the past, so there's that.
Oh, that's right. Wasn't it like 3 years in a row or something? At
I think at WrestleMania, I think Kane like tombstoned him or something.
That's right.
Him. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, that's great.
One of those times he was dressed as the San Diego Chicken. How about it?
Oh, man.
So, anyway.
So let us know what your favorite numbers are and why. and we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, all right. Splendid.
There you go. So from there, there was an interesting tweet that we follow, Hit the Deck. Our Twitter feed follows the NHL and other affiliates, including the Hall of Fame. So there was an interesting picture that they tweeted recently that had 2 9-foot statues of very famous hockey players. And I think everyone will know the goalie for a couple of reasons. But Cyclone Taylor, who played way back when in the 1800s, he was basically the first superstar, quote unquote, of professional hockey.
Huh.
Yeah, and he was nicknamed Cyclone Taylor because he was such a great skater at the time and a consummate scorer as well. So which we would refer to as a sniper nowadays, which the league is in such great hands nowadays that everybody has at least 1 or 2 good snipers, including the youth that's coming up in the NHL. But
I guess it's better than being named Cyclone because you keep getting spun around.
Absolutely, yeah, right. So he was a 2-time Stanley Cup champion and a multi-scoring champion as well. So he was only 5'8", but the thing that I love about hockey, and Gary and I have discussed this in the past as well, is its appreciation of its history and the willingness to not forget how they got to where they are and how the game has evolved into such a wonderful, awesome sport. And as we said before, case in point, with all of these young players coming up that are so good, so quick, which in the past that you'd have to get a couple of years under your belts before you were going to make a name for yourself in the league. But it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. But Cyclone Taylor was one of the first guys. His first name was Fred, by the way. So they honor him with a 9-foot statue, which is cool. But Ken Dryden, a really fascinating player. The reason why I think every hockey fan would know who he is, again, as the American Rhino was brought up in Hit the Deck's past, the video game series NHL Hockey by EA Sports.
It's in the game.
Absolutely. Well, one of the famous things that Ken Dryden did was he was a very tall man. I think he was 6'4" or something like that. He was one of his nicknames was something like the 4-story goalie or something. He was so tall. But how it ties into the NHL video game franchise is that when the play was on the other end and he was fine, there was nothing going on in his side, as goalies can do because they're always bent over and in that position to try and get a little breather, is he would famously rest his chin on his stick and stand up. So he'd look even taller. Okay, so yeah, 6-foot guy, and he had that the Mike Margiotta scary Jason mask as well to make it even more intimidating. But he would do that position. So the cool thing is the statue is Mr. Dryden in that position, but in the NHL video game series, that's what the goalie would do on the other end. If you ever watch a replay or something like that, like if your team is scoring and then you happen to look at your goalie up on the other end, he's leaning on his stick, much like Ken Dryden, a la Ken Dryden. So that's a little funny tidbit for you there.
You know, I would try that, but the court that we play on is so small that I always have to be on my toes.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no rest for the weary, unfortunately. But if you're playing on a surface that's 200 feet by 80, then you could probably get away with that a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Especially if you're 6'4", you could probably block the net a little bit easier than a normal-sized human being. So anyway, Ken Dryden, his resume is just absolutely astounding. He was a Stanley Cup winner in 1971 because he had an insane postseason and helped dethrone the juggernaut that was the Boston Bruins back then. But not only did he win the 1971 Stanley Cup championship, he won the Conn Smythe for the MVP of the postseason of the Stanley Cup Finals that year before he won the Calder Trophy in 1972 as the best rookie in the NHL.
Wow.
He's the only player to have accomplished that, which is just astounding.
That's pretty impressive.
It really is. Again, he was a Stanley Cup winner in 71, 73, and then 4 in a row from 1976 to 1979. The man only played about 7 seasons in the NHL, which is ridiculous. So his statistics are off the charts. He only appeared in about 350 games plus or so, give or take. And his winning percentage is by far ridiculously high. His goals against average is ridiculously high. His save percentage. So just for that brief period was remarkable. Now, the thing I also find extremely fascinating about Ken Dryden is that the man didn't retire because of injury or anything like that. He retired. He became a politician afterwards, too. He was an extremely intelligent man. He got his college degree and I think even master's degree and stuff like that. So his contract was up with the Canadians, and for being one of the all-time best goalies that there was, they were trying to shortchange him. So instead of showing up to camp and taking the money that they offered him, he sat out, and I think he ended up getting another master's degree in the meantime or something like that. And he just walked away from the game. He's like, all right, you're not going to pay me. 31 years old. The guy is retired, 6-time Stanley Cup champion.
I guess there's something to be said for going out on a high note.
Absolutely, my friend. And
leave him wanting more.
I guess so. It's true. It's true. The man went out. It doesn't get any better than that. He had success with the national team as well. And I believe he was the goalie, if I'm not mistaken, during that 72 Summit Series against Russia.
Oh, okay.
Which was, that was a pretty famous and intense series that Canada won and beat the Russians, which was just at the time unheard of. And then obviously the 1980 U.S. men's hockey team had something to say about that as well. But just really a remarkable career, fascinating man, Ken Dryden. So I'm really happy that those two big, intimidating, scary statues are there to greet you at the NHL zone. So one of my bucket list things, and I'm sure, Gary, you feel the same way, is to get to at least once to the Hockey Hall of Fame up in Toronto.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm more of a homebody, so going all the way up to Toronto to see a couple of statues is maybe beyond my my ambition. But, if it happens, it certainly would be nice.
Fair enough. And plus, you have the benefit of the internet, too, so you can kind of...
That's true. I can just look at a picture. It's just like being there.
Yeah, I'm sure there's virtual tours and things like that.
Yeah, with all these VR headsets that are coming out, you never have to leave your house.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, look how far we've come in just the last decade in terms of cell phones just do everything now. So,
you know what? This is going to be way off topic, except for the possible very, very, very tangential relation of video games. Of the, you had mentioned the EA NHL series, but speaking of VR headsets, one thing I want to get my hands on at some point is the new PlayStation VR. They have a Batman game where you play as Batman, and the VR headset, you're just seeing things from his perspective, so you can look around the Batcave and see the Batcave and look down and see yourself dressed as Batman and throw batarangs and stuff. So I want to get my hands on that at some point.
Santa Claus.
Yeah. Oh.
Wow. That's exciting. Very, very exciting.
Yeah.
So, hey, speaking of which, maybe EA is working on a virtual reality game like that where if you're going to play as the goalie in NHL hockey, maybe you can put that headset on and kind of make the moves.
Yeah, I've wanted something like that for years, just to, hone my skills in the privacy and comfort of my own home. But I suppose technology is marching on ever further, so maybe it'll happen. Be nice.
Cool stuff, man. Yeah, something to look forward to, but that's exciting. Because, Gary and I, we make no apologies for being huge Batman fans, and if you're not, what are you doing? Come on. That's really awesome. I can't wait to even see that game, let alone play it. I'd lose my mind. Very cool.
Yeah.
So from there, we'll go to the National Women's Hockey League. If you're not familiar with the ladies who play professional hockey, Gary and I will educate you a little bit on that. But last year was their first season, and there are only 4 teams so far. There's a team in Boston, in Buffalo, Connecticut, and there was a team in Brooklyn.
Whatever happened to them, I wonder?
Well, over the summer, and Sue, if you're listening out there, we were wondering if you may have something to do with this or not, Miss Devil fan. But the New York Riveters, who used to play in Brooklyn, are now playing in the home of the New Jersey Devils over in Newark. So,
and if you did have something to do with it, Give them back. Come on. We want our team back.
Because really, at least in the first two seasons last year and the current season coming up, their schedule is kind of sparse. So they only play about 21 games scheduled so far. I'm not sure about the postseason. They do have a postseason. But the home games are tough to come by. So Gary and I wanted to go catch a game last year in Brooklyn, and we missed out because there were limited home games. And if your schedule isn't open for it, you're not going to be able to go, so you miss out. So a couple of weeks ago, Gary was telling me about some other teams that Brooklyn has lost, in, not to mention the Brooklyn Dodgers, but we never got over that anyway. He mentioned going to check out the New York Riveters play, which is I definitely love to see them. And as you heard in the past, Snipe Town, they have a good relationship with the National Women's Hockey League as well. Yeah. They were guests on Hit the Deck.
Yep, Sam Chimo is on talking about the captain of the Riveters, who makes a really ridiculous commute from upstate New York every time she has to come in and practice, let alone play. So, I don't know if the commute is easier to Newark or harder, but still, you've got to give her a ton of respect for that kind of dedication.
Yeah, that really puts it on a whole new level. Anytime that you don't feel like practicing or something like that, there's no excuse, because that is a tough trip coming and going. So forget about trying to play. And as you know, anybody who's played out there, any kind of hockey, deck hockey, roller hockey, skating, ice hockey and stuff like that, is when you play, it takes so much out of you, and your lower body is just, you can barely walk if you've played well, at least. And your lower back is killing you, and your thighs are just, it's hard.
And that's just from skating, James. Forget checks.
Exactly right.
Hockey hurts.
It does. In the days when
says the guy who's dressed head to toe in robust protective gear.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest. Gary's on a couple of your knees. Really, they're rough. So anything, and you're a butterfly goalie too. And playing on the concrete that we play on, it's extremely rough. So don't sell yourself short at all. But exactly, that's just from skating, and forget about getting hit and shooting and all that stuff. So to decompress and then get back in the car and go driving another 4 to 6 hours or however heck it long it
basically in the middle of the night.
Yeah, so it's not an easy drive either, because you have to probably go through New York City, and just driving through the city is a nightmare. So if hopefully she could bypass, I don't know, go through Jersey or something like that, but it's an insane commitment. So we tip our cap to the ladies and their wonderful captain over there for the New York Riveters. So even though they play in New Jersey now, they are still known as the New York Riveters. I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon, but it just kind of made the odds for Gary and I getting to a game a lot harder. So
I guess
with that said,
I guess that makes it the third New York team that plays in New Jersey.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
After the Jets and Giants of football.
That's right. That's right. So if you're curious as to why the Riveters or the National Women's Hockey League has such a short schedule, well, in their defense, as we mentioned before, is that the previous two minor league teams that played at
Actually, James, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Don't the Red Bulls play in New Jersey as well?
They do. You're absolutely right.
All right, so it's the fourth team.
There you go.
Jeez, what? Why can't I'm just making noises at this point. I'm incredulous.
Well, I have no answers for you either. So,
but I'm sorry, I had interrupted you. But what you were starting to say? Let's recap the kind of the history of pro sports at Aviator Arena, which is in Brooklyn, which is where the Riveters had played. So they got the Aces. Right? There was a new independent league started up. Were they the Brooklyn Aces, or I guess? I
believe they were.
Yeah. Okay. So the Aces played there. That league folded. Then a couple years later, a new independent league started, and the Aviators played there.
Right.
And then that league folded.
Yep.
Although not before James and I saw a crazy, crazy game where the visiting team at one point had more players in the penalty box than they did on the bench.
That is literal.
Yes.
You're not exaggerating.
There was like 10 players in the penalty box and 4 on the bench, I think at the start of the third period.
Yep. Gary counted them.
Yeah. But that also, I also witnessed a goalie trying to decapitate a referee with a puck, which was, not maybe the smartest idea. But his night got cut short.
Yes.
But so that was the Aviators, and then the Riveters finally come in, and their league has not folded, thankfully, but they up and left for another state. So we can't win. And by we, I mean you more than I, because you live in Brooklyn. I just visit there very infrequently.
Yeah, so because you guys know what you're doing in Queens, you can hold on to teams over there. So. Uh-huh. And thank you very much, because we do love the New York Mets very, very much. But it's sad and weird, because New York, the tri-state area, is a good hotbed for hockey. So the Devils have been a good team for a long time, and deservedly so. So hopefully, like Gary was mentioning off air, that maybe the Riveters can get more exposure over there in an NHL rink. Mm-hmm. But it's weird, yeah. So one of the reasons why that they have to play such a limited amount of games is that there's just not enough money to sustain these minor league hockey leagues. I said league twice. I'm sorry for that. But
that's okay.
It's we're 0 for 3 in Brooklyn. So it's a minus hat trick. So we're a -3 in the plus minus. Let's put it that way. So it's embarrassing.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Yeah, but for everybody else out there, please go check them out. Go root them on. Great stories. They have a Facebook page, and you could even look them up on Wikipedia. And there is an official website for the National Women's Hockey League. So they are – I'd love to see a live game, actually. So Gary and I were looking forward to going to see one, but we'll see about that. Again, there's a team in Boston, in Buffalo, in Connecticut, and now in New Jersey. I do know that the Boston team had a TV contract too, so you can see the games on TV in the Boston area, which makes sense because that is a hockey hotbed if there ever is one in the world. So good for them, and we hope that this league has a lot better luck than the New York hockey leagues or Eastern leagues, whatever they were called, with the Aces and the Aviators. So go get them, girls.
Yeah. Have at. Do us proud, and whatever other cliches we can come up with.
That's right. Yeah, play for great hockey fans like Sue and Jen and Julia. Okay, you got them looking up to you. So do a good job.
Last minute remaining in the podcast.
All right, it is time to wrap up the latest edition of the Hit the Deck Show. I did it again, the Hit the Deck Show. When have I ever called it that? Ay.
It is a show.
Yeah, but it's not a thing we say. Thank you for listening to the latest installment of the Hit the Deck podcast. We are oh so happy to have you. We would not be able to do this. We literally would not be able to do this show without you, or at the very least, we would have no cause to do it without you. So we definitely appreciate your patronage. If you want to be kept abreast of developments on the show, and if you want to know the very moment when a podcast drops, I implore you not only to follow us on Twitter at Hit the Deck Pod, but subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or really whatever podcasting outlet you prefer. We're probably there. So subscribe and get access to the podcast. Get it injected directly into your ears the very second that it drops. You will be doing us a favor and possibly yourself as well. I also would like to thank Pops for being the voice of the podcast, Anthony Sajazi for music used in the podcast, the LIQ for sound effects in the podcast. James, what is there left to say?
Really not much. You already mentioned it at the top of the show, is that if you want to contact us through email, hitthedeck@gmail.com, Instagram, we're at hitthedeck, as well as Facebook at hitthedeck. And also, just as a friendly reminder, don't forget to set your clocks back if you're listening to this podcast before Sunday morning at 2 a.m.
Yes, thank you, sir, for that public service announcement. And before we wrap up, I just want to remind you, if you happen to be angry, as I myself am sometimes angry, for instance, at the fact that I've been watching Christmas commercials all night before we have, in fact, had the opportunity to set our clocks back, please try very hard to remember it's deck hockey. Don't be that guy. Thanks, everybody. Good show, James. Well done. Well met, sir. Yes, quite good. Yes, quite good. Yes.